Hello everyone and welcome to another video of the Sky channel. Now this video we are going to be talking about the shooter jungle ants and how these ants are going to change the meta. But before we get started, I do want to give a big shout out to Aptoide. If you download the ants through Aptoide and use our promo code, you'll be able to get 10 to 35% bonus on each of your purchases, meaning that if you purchase a $100 pack, you'll be getting between $10 and $35 back. If you have any questions, feel free to join our Discord channel and I will be happy to assist you. I also want to let everyone know that Aptoide has bonus days where your minimum bonus gets increased, and the two bonus days of February are 6th February, which gives you a 5% bonus, and 20th February, which gives you a 10% bonus. So don't forget to avail this bonus so you can get whatever's in the events much cheaper. Okay, back to the video. So first of all, we knew that the new shooter meta would be focused on skill damage. That's because when the Gladiator Mantis came out, you could see that all of its talents were focusing towards skill damage instead of normal attack damage. And whenever a new insect comes out, you should know that it is going to be determining where the new meta is going towards. So usually it's not just, an insect or an ant coming out by itself. It's usually an indication of what the upcoming meta is going to become. And of course, that's exactly what happened. So when you go into the rewards preview, you can take a look at the different jungle ants that are available. We're going to talk about the shooter ones. A few things to note. They do have a much higher attack and defense as compared to Baron ants. Baron has about, 96% max. This is 120. That being said, that is also consistent with the newest paid ants that have been released. In particular, there's only been one released so far at the time of this recording, which is the carrier ant that gives a lot of dodge. That also has 120%, but my assumption is that as new ants are released, it's also going to be 120% instead of 96. We could also see that it does give a pretty high attack, 100% to all squads. Those are just some basic stuff. I'm not going to talk too much more about them. Skill 1 is also pretty standard, and then skill 6 gives you attack, defense, and damage and health. Nothing too fancy here as well. So now we're going to get to the meat of stuff. Skill number 2. First of all, I do want you to notice that it says effective range 6. That's kind of strange because up until now, everything has been effective range 5. And if you don't know the way effective range works, I'll give you a little bit of a quick summary. Let's assume this troop 1, this carrier 1, this is my unit, and this guardian 1 is actually your unit. Now assume that we are both fighting each other. How effective range works is essentially, let's say my graceful twig ant, which is my backline, wants to attack one of your units. How it works is that the golden crystal that I have is effective range 1, the Shikari master is effective range 2, and then your mimicry master is effective range 3. So to get to mimicry master, that's 3 range. To get to your leaf devourer, that's 4 range, and then to get to your hairy panther, that's 5 range. So even though my graceful twig ant is at the back of my unit, in 5 range, it can attack everything, which may make you wonder, why would we ever need 6? Well, we'll get to that soon. Back to the Silver Ant. Okay, 80% chance to launch 2 attacks against the enemy squad. Now, it seems to be that it's going to be the same squad attacked both times. Each attack deals 250% damage and applies 1 layer of vulnerability mark. And each layer increases the damage the target takes from this skill by 12%. The mark is stackable and lasts until the end of battle. Okay, so 250% damage and then doing that twice, but before you do it the second time, you already have a vulnerability mark, so you're actually doing a 12% extra damage the second time. That is quite high. So 80% to do this, right? Even if we were to ignore the increase in damage part, that's like 500% damage each turn with 80% probability. 80% is extremely high, 500% damage is extremely high as well. And then to top things up, there's that extra ability to do more and more damage, and it's stackable until the end of battle, which means that if you keep on targeting the same row multiple times during battle, you'll be doing a crazy amount of damage to it, because remember, you're applying 2 vulnerability marks to the squad each turn. So extremely high damage. This is assuming that both attacks hit the same target, which is my assumption. I did ask some people and they said that's how they read it as well. So that is of course something that I cannot confirm right now, but I think that's the way it goes. So you can see how this is a very deadly skill, right? You are doing a lot of damage and it can pile up really fast. Skill number 5. 70% chance to deal 230% damage to all squads. Again, 70% is really high. 230 to all squads adds up to 690% in total. Effective range, 6. So both skill 2 and skill 5 seem to be pretty deadly and pretty high damage dealing skills. Let's go to skill 8. Each round, there's a 70% chance to increase the positioning distance of its squad by 1, which means that it's almost as if there was a 4th row in your unit and this ant, Saharan Silver Ant, went to that 4th row. And now you can see why it makes sense, right? Because if you are moving 1 row back, 6 means that you can still target all of the enemy's ants, including the ones that are in the back row. Okay, but why is this important? When dealing damage, the damage is increased by 10% for every 1 range between its squad and the target enemy squad. Now, assuming that you did move 1 back, that means that if you are doing damage to the front row, you're doing a 40% increased damage. Move to the middle row, that's 50% increased damage, and move to the back row of the enemy, you are doing 60% extra damage to the enemy's backline. That is a lot of extra damage. And even if you don't increase the positioning distance, the skill still stands, right? So in that case, without increasing the positional distance, which is, by the way, 70% is a high chance, so most of the time you will be increasing the positional distance. But even if you don't, that's like 30 to 50% extra damage that you're doing to the enemy squad. So that is an amazing skill, I think. Of course, I've been reading out the max level effect. For this particular skill, if you were to have it at level 10, it's still good. But of course, the ability gets sort of like the damage increase ability gets halved at level 10, and the chance of increasing positional distance is 50%. And in case you're interested, you can also take a look at level 10 for the skill 2, 80%, and dealing 200% damage, and then applying the vulnerability mark, which gives a 7% extra. And skill 5, it is basically 70% chance to deal 180% damage to each of the enemy squads. Okay, so overall, I think the Saharan Silver Ant is actually pretty deadly. With its ability to do a lot of damage using its 2 damage dealing skills, and then having that skill 8 that can actually increase the damage substantially further, not to mention skill 2 having that vulnerability mark that can keep on increasing its damage each time, I think it will end up becoming a very, very, very high damage dealing ant. So it's looking really good for the Saharan Silver Ant. But you know what's interesting? The interesting thing is that out of the 2 jungle ants, the Saharan Silver Ant is a less rare ant, and basically how you get that is that you can check the winning and losing rewards, and if you go into them, you'll notice that in the hatch preview, Dominated gives you basically all of them, as you can imagine, but Explore, which means that you didn't win the jungle, only gives you these 3, which includes the Saharan Silver Ant, but you don't get the other jungle shooter ant, which means that it is the rarer one. So let's take a look at the rarer shooter ant. And we're only going to focus on skill 2, skill 5, and skill 8 because most of the other skills are pretty similar. Skill 7 just gives defense instead of attack. So let's go to skill 2. If our troop attacks first, increase damage by 30%. And if our troop attacks second, reduces damage taken by 30%. And it's a pre-combat skill that is actually applying this effect to all squads in the troop. So it doesn't just affect its own squad, but all squads in the troop, which is amazing, right? Because you are giving a buff of damage to all of your high damage dealing ants potentially, or if you are slower than the enemy, you're actually increasing your survivability by reducing damage taken by 30%. This is a pretty great skill. At level 10, you get that same thing at 20%, which is also pretty good. Skill 5. 70% chance to copy a damage skill of our backline shooter squad, and then the skill effect is additionally increased by 25%. At level 10, it's pretty much the same thing, just that it's increased by 15%. So think about this for a minute. Saharan Silver Ant is definitely going to be in the backline because we want to increase that positional distance. It wouldn't make sense to have it anywhere else, right? Now, if you are copying a damage skill off the backline, you have two options. You're either copying skill 2 or you're copying skill 5, right? Because skill 8 is not a damage skill. Now, remember I already mentioned that Saharan Silver Ant's skills were extremely high damage, right? Now you're copying that high damage and you're increasing the skill effect by 25%, which means that it's even stronger than what we saw in the Saharan Silver Ant. It just adds up to super high damage. Now what I don't know for sure is that if you copy skill 2, does it also add additional vulnerability marks to the squad that you target? Because if that's the case, you can imagine how this can be a really crazy overpowered, because you're just applying 4 vulnerability marks per turn potentially to the same squad. That would be absolutely deadly. Okay, skill 8. All of our squads get an extra 30% health, and each time a skill is released, a 50% chance to increase the defense of its own squad by 45%, which is stackable. And also trigger a healing effect with a healing ratio of 150%. So increasing your health, very good, because you want to make sure you live longer. And then each time the skill is released, you have a 50% chance of increasing your defense, and you only have one skill, which is skill 5, and assuming you ended up copying skill 2 of Silver Ant, you're going to be able to do 2 skills, which means there's a 50% chance you'll increase your defense by 45%, and then you might increase it 45% again, so potentially 90% increase in defense during that one turn, and then also healing by healing ratio of 150% twice potentially, which means you can heal 300% in one turn. So overall, really good. And of course, as you can see, it works really well with the Saharan Silver Ant. Okay, so those are the 2 jungle ants for shooters that are out. And we already know that Gladiator Mantis is going to work really well with it because of its skill damage buffs. But you must be wondering what is going to be the 3rd ant that we'll have to add to make the full meta. So first of all, my assumption is that shooters are due for a new paid ant. So it's possible that within the next few weeks, we might see a paid ant come out, and that may be the actual meta. But for now, we can see certain options that are available to us. Now, when going through the list, I did see certain ants that I think would make a good fit. The first one is the one that I just can't seem to get. It's Weaver. And why is that helpful? Well, first of all, if you just quickly go through the skills, there's a chance to remove debuffs, which is great. Extra health and defense as well, which is good. But this is where I think it would be pretty helpful. The fact that you're actually adding combat speed to 2 of your units. The double hit status isn't that cool, but the combat speed is, because if you are giving additional combat speed to 2 units, it works well with the ability of that rarer jungle ant, right? If you're going first, it increases your damage by 30%. And having higher combat speed means that you might go first and get that extra 30% damage, and you're already doing so much damage, so that extra 30% is very helpful. So that's where I think that Weaver can actually come out to be helpful. Not to mention that it does have the ability to increase damage by 20%, and that can be stacked up to 80%. And of course, for that, it needs 2 of the enemy squads to take damage, which is possible through some of these skills like skill 5 for silver. And assuming you copy skill 5, you can actually do that as well. Okay, so that's Weaver. Weaver's not the only option. I do see Formica Clara being a very nice option as well. And I'll explain why. If you look at skill 2, reduces the skill damage to all our squads by 80% in the first round. And of course, it decreases 20% each round until it gets to 0, which is great because it allows you to live much longer, right? So 80% and 60% reduce in the second round, 40% in the third round, 20 in the fourth, and then of course 0. This is helpful, especially because you want to make sure that you live long enough to do a lot of damage. Skill 5 has a 50% chance to deal 250% damage to 2 of the enemy's squads and increases their skill damage taken by 25% unless it's a carrier, in which case it's 50% for 2 rounds. So the damage itself isn't something that I'd say is really cool, but the fact that it's increasing skill damage taken by them by up to 50% if it's a carrier, now that is great because you already have certain ants that are doing a lot of damage, which includes the Saharan Silver Ant and also the other one because it can mimic the abilities of the Saharan Silver Ant and do a lot of damage as well. So this additional skill damage is very welcome. And then there's skill 8. So it's providing a healing of 300% in each round, which is very helpful because you already have certain healing coming from the other end. So now you're having double healing, which I can see how that can go really well together. And then additional skill damage of our shooter squad in the back line, which is Saharan Silver Ant, gets 5% each turn. So each turn you get additional skill damage of 5% for the back line, and that's stackable. And then once per turn, when the combat skill of the backline is triggered, it increases the skill damage of the squad by 200% to the target of that skill. So basically it allows you to do these super powered hits with a lot more skill damage, and it just keeps on adding skill damage as well to the backline. Well, we all know FC is a really good support, especially for the backline. And for us, we already have a pretty high damage backline ant, so this can work really well as well. So those are the two that I can feel really gel well with the current jungle ants. There's a good chance they might release another ant, as I mentioned, and that might work even better. But for now, these two seem to work really well. Okay, so that's my guess of the meta that's going to come out once they release the jungle ants. And I hope this video was helpful for you. If it was, please like, please subscribe to our channel. Please also join our Discord group where you can actually join active conversations about these topics. And of course, follow our Instagram. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye.